Today's office hours, the leaky gut. Leaky gut is one of these really misunderstood conditions, and I hesitate to even call it a condition because really what it is a mechanism. It is a mechanism where something that should function normally in the body, specifically the digestive tract, is not functioning normally. And I think the most straightforward way to explain it in a way that people can understand is to show you this strainer. So this strainer has very fine holes in it. And so if I strain water through this, obviously the water is going to go through. But if I strain grapes, the grapes are not going to go through because they're too big. And particularly if the strainer's in good shape. Now, if the strainer has big holes in it, the grapes might go through, right? The grapes that are meant to stay in the strainer might go through. So you can think of the inside of the strainer as the lumen of the gut, which is again outside of the body, right? That what's in your gut is not really in your body. It's in this 30-foot digestive superhighway tunnel that runs from your mouth to your anus. And the purpose of the gut lining is to keep things in the gut and to selectively decide what can get absorbed through and make it into the body. So think of what's coming through the strainer as what's getting through the gut lining and entering your body, okay? So if the holes are intact, the water might get through and some oatmeal might get through if it's thin enough, but grapes would not get through. And so you can think of grapes as toxins, as just hypothetically, of course, grapes are not toxins, but you could think of grapes as indigested, poorly digested food particles, as toxins, as viral threats, as things that either are too large size-wise to go through the net or that the net has selectively decided you're not getting it. And then so those grapes would stay in the lumen and they would be excreted out through the gut because of course the gut is a digestive organ and part of digestion is elimination, not just absorption. Other things would get through and get absorbed through into the body. So that all is great when the net is in good shape. But what happens is a net can develop holes in it. And there are a couple of different categories of things. I did a different office hours on causes of leaky gut and how to address it. And today I really want to focus on mechanisms, okay? So you can look at that archive version for how to, solutions for leaky gut. And I'll mention a little bit about that later on in this office hours. But what I want to tell you is that the things that typically cause it are often things in your medicine cabinet. So non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are really sort of at the top of the list there. Okay, so medication is a really big, 5 big categories I want to tell you about. Medication is a big one, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, steroids, other drugs that can do it, but those would be medication number 1. Diet number 2. You've been reading a lot on the news. I've been talking about it on Instagram. Ultra-processed foods and why ultra-processed foods are so bad for you. And one of the things that ultra-processed foods do is they have ingredients in them, emulsifiers and other things that can disrupt that gut lining, okay? They can also disrupt the gut microbiome, which is a third thing. So we have medications, we have diet, we have the microbiome. Stress is a big one, can disrupt the gut lining, infections, and then inflammation, which can be from things like radiation, etc. So these are all things that can disrupt the gut lining. But I want you to understand anatomically that on one side of the gut lining, the side facing the gut lumen, so the part that's outside the body, you have a thick mucus layer. And part of the mucus layer is to protect the lining because the lining is only 1 cell thick. So that's razor thin. And in order to provide sort of a buffer zone to prevent things from going through, you have this mucus layer, okay? And so there are things that can disrupt the mucus layer too. So non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, infections, ultra-processed foods, etc., those can burrow through the mucus layer and disrupt that. So it's not just the gut lining that's at risk. Of course, the microbiome, we know that the gut flora, particularly some of those essential species, are part of their role is to do a lot of different things, digest foods, synthesize vitamins, train the immune system, etc. But part of their job is to also watch out for the integrity of the gut lining and maintain that. So if you're doing things that also disrupt the microbiome, like taking antibiotics, drinking a lot of alcohol, not eating a healthy diet, those are things that are going to be disruptive to the microbiome and to the gut lining. And remember, you can't do those things and then take a pill. That is magical thinking 101, to think that you're gonna, take antibiotics every time you have the sniffles, have 2 cocktails a day, eat Cheetos whenever you want them, and then presto, I'm gonna take a probiotic or a short chain fatty acid supplement, and my gut lining is gonna be fine, my microbiome is gonna be fine. That is not how it works, okay? And when I see people with leaky gut, they're often interested in what can I do? And what I have to convince them is, what can you undo? What can you stop doing? Because what damages lining in the first place is often something they're doing. Now, it's not always your fault, right? I'm not trying to lay blame. Often these things are things that people don't know about, or it could be an infection that happened. It could be that you had a radiation for ovarian cancer. That's certainly not your fault. Speaking of ovarian cancer, there was a fantastic article in my GI feed this morning. Researchers at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, have done this incredible research to find that there are significant disorders in the microbiome linked to ovarian cancer. And the reason that's so important, they had done similar work and found changes with endometrial cancer, but the reason it's so important for ovarian cancer is that ovarian cancer is often referred to in medical circles as a silent killer, because early on, there are not a lot of signs and symptoms often. And so finding these microbial changes, these disruptions to the microbiome that were very clearly associated with ovarian cancer is such a great advance, and maybe can lead to some testing that we can do, particularly for people who are at risk for ovarian cancer. So that's a little aside. But again, when I'm counseling patients about leaky gut, it is often about what we need to stop doing. So we need to get the ultra-processed foods out of the diet. We need to increase the fiber in the diet. Why? Because indigestible or poorly digestible fiber is fermented by gut bacteria to something called short-chain fatty acids. You've heard me talk about that before. Things like butyric acid and propionic acid and acetic acid. And these substances feed the cells along the gut lining, and they help to maintain the integrity of the gut lining, in addition to modulating and guiding the immune response. So they're super, super important. And we don't have any data that taking a short-chain fatty acid supplement does the same thing, right? You have to actually eat the food. There's no shortcut. It's like if you want to be, I don't know if any of you are distance runner fans. I'm a very slow marathoner. I've done like 5 marathons. I've never even come close to doing a marathon 4 hours or sub 4. It's a goal I have, but I think my fastest time was like 4:26 or 4:18 or something. But anyway, I love watching documentaries and shows about distance runners. And I recently watched a documentary called Kipchoge, about Eliud Kipchoge, arguably, or actually without argument, the greatest distance runner of all time. And the documentary was about Kipchoge's effort to break the 2-hour barrier for the marathon. Now, keep in mind, I can't break the 4-hour barrier for the marathon, okay? So he's running more than twice as fast as I'm running, which is just mind-boggling and amazing. And so it was a Nike project, of course, and they did this thing in Europe, and I won't tell you what happened, but it's a really wonderful documentary, and it shows a lot of him running in his village where he's from, and running with his team and so on, and it's really brilliant. And I don't know how I even got into the running, but oh yes, now I've regained my thread. You cannot run like Eliud Kipchoge by taking a pill or putting some electrodes on your legs and thinking, oh, I'm going to stimulate my muscles and I'm going to get really fast. That's not how it works. You can't have Jillian Michaels' 6-pack by taking a pill or putting some, machine on you and having it, jostle your muscles and think. You have to do the work. You have to do the work. And so one of the things that I want to tell you, there's great optimism in the gut. There's so much. I mean, we know from the study published in the journal Nature in 2014 that within 30 hours of food hitting the gut, we can see significant changes in the microbiome. We can see not just some microbes changing, but different genes turned on and off. So you can wake up, today is Tuesday, you can wake up Thursday morning with a microbiome that's healthier, that's going to protect you against disease, etc. But you have to do the work. You're not going to get there by taking a pill. You can get there by changing your diet, by making different choices, by eating more fiber, by eating less Cheetos. I mentioned Cheetos because for years, every Thursday, which was my very busy endoscopy day at the hospital, I would go down to the physician's lounge and eat a bag of Cheetos. They shouldn't have Cheetos in the physician's lounge, but they have donuts, Cheetos, soda, all kinds of things. I would not have the donuts and the soda, but I would eat a bag of Cheetos on Thursdays. And then I was like, you know what? I mean, it's a small bag, but I thought, you know, I don't have to eat these Cheetos. And since Cheetos, I don't even know what food group they are. You know, I know they're gluten-free and they have corn in them somewhere, but it's just a long list of chemicals. So I was like, even though it's a small bag and I have, 12 colonoscopies to do, I don't need these Cheetos. But you cannot create a healthy gut lining through taking a pill. I've been a gastroenterologist for a long time. I've been a doctor for 30 years. I finished medical school in 91, so for 31 years. And I finished my gastroenterology fellowship in 1997. So I've been a gastroenterologist for almost 26 years. And believe me, if there was a pill, a supplement out there you could take that would, make your gut lining like new, I would tell you about it. I'd be the first one to tell you about it. But there really isn't. But there are lots of other things you can do. So let's start with the things you should stop doing. You need to take a good look in your medicine cabinet, and you need to look at every single drug that's in there. And you need to, obviously with the help of your healthcare professional, not me, and you need to decide, why am I taking this? What's a risk? What's a benefit? You need to look it up, see what the side effects are, and decide, is this something I really need? And again, have an in-depth discussion with your physician about it. And I want you to do this for prescription, for over-the-counter, for vitamins, minerals, and supplements, because those vitamins, minerals, or supplements are full of substances that can sometimes be problematic for your gut lining and your microbiome also, okay? So that's the first thing. I want you to take a good look at the medicine cabinet. The second thing is, I want you to take a good look at your diet, and I want you to take an honest look. And I'll tell you, my diet is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I have dark chocolate almost every night, but not a lot, like 3 squares. And let's see, I had pizza Sunday at my sister's house and ice cream and bread pudding. I don't normally eat those things, but I was feeling joyful. But what I do is I pay attention to the things I need to eat. I pay attention to that number of 30 different 30 different plant foods per week that the American Gut Project tells us leads to a more diverse and robust microbiome. And I know how I feel when I eat that way. And so a more typical day of eating for me was yesterday. I had a big bowl of berries in the morning. And then for lunch, I had a salad and I made a dressing with it, and I didn't have anything much to put on it, but it was, had a lot of microgreens from the farmer's market. So it was different, baby lettuce, microgreens. I had some avocado, some cherry tomatoes, a little bit of a boring salad. I made my little dressing. And then for dinner, I had a big dinner. I had salmon and brown rice and chickpeas and Brussels sprouts and roasted carrots. I was at yoga. My husband made that yummy dinner. So that was good. And I can tell, right, this morning, without going into too much detail, as a result of, the plants, the berries, the salad, the brown rice, the chickpeas, the Brussels sprouts, the carrots, all of that, as a result of the yoga and the movement, as a result of drinking the water, good things were happening for me in the bathroom this morning. Stool nirvana was happening, right? But that is not because I took a pill. So you've got to do the work. But my point is, the work can involve some ice cream and bread pudding and pizza every now and again, right? But you can't eat that stuff every day and expect good things. And I, as much as I've been in this world for decades, I still marvel. I mean, I literally sat there on the pot this morning, as I had this urgent call, which is great, right? It's so good to wake up in the morning and be like, oh, gotta go. I had this urgent call, and I sat there and had this wonderful elimination and a clean wipe, even a little bit of green tinge, which, the green wipe is even better than the clean wipe, and just felt so good, and it was because of what I had eaten the day before, right? And everything else, I had moved, I drank water, I ate well, all of that. So Sunday night, which was the pizza and bread pudding and ice cream night, was a little bit different Monday morning in the bathroom. Not so much, right? So our body gives us this incredible feedback, and it often gives it to us in the bathroom. It can give it to us in different ways. It can give it to us with reflux, with nausea, with bloating, with whatever it is, but it often gives it to us in the bathroom with what's coming out. And so, I want you to pay attention to that and remember that your body is trying to give you these signals. Okay, now I've strayed far afield. Yeah, I didn't mention lectins, Adam, because I am not on the lectin train. I believe lectins and legumes are fine for us, but that's for another conversation. So I got off track a little bit talking about my stool nirvana, but I always want to bring it back to this, that you have incredible control over what's going on in your gut. And your gut influences a lot of different things that are going on in your body. We know our gut influences our brain health and our immune health and our cardiovascular health and our metabolic health and so many other things. And we do have control over it. And even if you are dealt a bad hand, even if you have a genetic predisposition to an illness, let's say an autoimmune illness like Crohn's or colon cancer or something, you can still make improvements. You can still maybe diverge, even if you have the diagnosis. I have hundreds of patients with inflammatory bowel disease who are now off their biologics, off their steroids, doing well, in remission because of the changes that they've made in their diet and their lifestyle and the medications they're taking and their stress and their alcohol, their exercise, their exposure to nature, all of it. So it is a message of optimism from me as a gastroenterologist, but the idea that, I'm going to take short chain fatty acid capsule and some zinc and glutamine and call it a day is not going to get you there, all right? It's not going to get you to the finish line. Okay, so about leaky gut. Leaky gut is a mechanism rather than an actual diagnosis. What it says when we talk about the, sort of official term is increased intestinal permeability, what it tells us is that these holes are, I don't know what what is this? Mascara. I don't know why mascara is on my desk down here, but it is. What it tells us is that these holes in your fishing net, if you will, are bigger than they should be. And what that means is that things are penetrating through into your body that shouldn't be going through. On the other hand, remember that it's bidirectional transportation, bidirectional movement through the net. So in addition to nutrients being absorbed through the net, cellular waste and debris from, when the cells do their business, they create waste matter. And that cellular debris is being moved from the cells into the bloodstream and also through the net the other way so that it can be dumped out into the lumen of the gut and excreted and eliminated. And so it is this bidirectional transportation. And one of the interesting things we find when there's an increase in intestinal permeability is that it interferes with nutrient absorption, which means even if you're eating a really healthy diet, you may not be absorbing and assimilating all of those nutrients, okay? So that's why it's really important to make sure that that gut lining is intact. Now, people often want to know, well, what about a test? There is a test, an intestinal permeability test. There are a couple of different ones. I used to do one in my office that was made by a company called Genova, but I stopped. And here's why I stopped. The test is not super reliable. You have plenty of people with increased intestinal permeability where it was saying, it was okay. And you have people who were getting an abnormal result who probably have a fine gut lining. So it just wasn't, I did not find it to be a super reliable test. And leaky gut is more a clinical diagnosis from looking at all the different factors that are going on and then making a decision about whether you think there's increased intestinal permeability. And the way the test is done, if you're interested, is it's a solution of two sugars, a small sugar and a large sugar, so lactulose and mannitol, and you drink it, and then obviously the small sugar is supposed to be able to go through and get absorbed and excreted in the urine, and the big sugar, the lactulose, not so much. So the test is looking at the lactulose mannitol ratio, okay, to decide whether there is increased passage of the larger sugar. So it's a urine collection, but the test, there's so many things that can affect the test with diet and this and that and whether it's done properly. So we like in medicine, and I think you out there as patients like this idea of drawing a straight line. You want to be able to say, this thing is wrong and this is why, and when you fix it, all is well. And the gut, there are not a lot of straight lines with the gut. The gut is a very curved organ, and that tends to be, things are a little bit convoluted, because when I see patients in the office, and patients will come in and say, I have brain fog, I feel inflamed, I have trouble concentrating, I'm having bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and I think I have a leaky gut. And often they've had a test for leaky gut saying they have increased intestinal permeability. But here's the problem. If I take 100 random people and I do an intestinal permeability test on them, a high percentage are also going to have an abnormal test. It's the same for the SIBO test, the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth test. Line 100 people up, as many as 30 of them will have an abnormal SIBO test. who don't have symptoms that were, SIBO wasn't even on their radar. So it's not like a test, like an EKG that can tell me, well, I mean, I'm not a cardiologist, but I know how to read an EKG. It's not like an EKG that can tell us, yes, this person's having a heart attack, or this person is in atrial fibrillation, or, that is a straight line test. Literally, the EKG is these straight lines. That's a test that can tell us something definitive. When I do a colonoscopy on you, I can tell you definitively, yes, you have a polyp, you have diverticulosis, you have, whatever it is. I have seen it. I can look at the polyp on the colonoscopy and tell you, you have a polyp. But we can't do that with a leaky gut test. And what I see, just to be very honest, is I see a lot of this testing being a portal to suck people in, people who are not feeling well, and quite frankly, people who are desperate to feel better, sucking them in with these tests and then selling them a bunch of supplements that are really not getting them better. I mean, the average person who I see in my office is taking a lot of supplements. And we do, at the first visit, I have them bring everything in a shopping bag and we put everything out on the table. And then I usually have my rubbish bin right underneath and I show it to them and I tell them, what it's supposed to do, but what it's actually doing. And in addition, it's putting strain on your liver, your kidneys, or whatever. It's not doing what you think it's doing. We put it in the rubbish bin and we go through. We don't necessarily throw out all the supplements. Sometimes they need vitamin D because their vitamin D level is low. Sometimes they need, folic acid because they're taking a medication that can deplete folic acid. Sometimes they're taking magnesium and it's helping them with bowel movements and, muscle cramps. So it's not like all supplements are bad by any stretch of the imagination. But the same approach that I take with prescription medication, which is a judicious approach. So let's make sure that the benefit of this medication outweighs the risk. That's the same approach I take with vitamins, minerals, and supplements because these things are drugs, okay? Just because they're not prescription drugs, whether something needs a prescription or not is something that the FDA decides. But they are drugs. They are substances that can be biologically active, that can affect your body in different ways, and they're unregulated. We don't know half the time what these things are actually doing. So when that bottle says at the bottom, this medication is not intended to treat, cure any illness, blah, 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 believe it. They've told you something really important. They said this drug is not intended to treat or cure any disease, including the one you have. So, why take something when the manufacturers themselves are telling you that there's no proof that this thing does, right? And again, I'm not saying never take a supplement, but I want you to be smart about it because I'll tell you, several years ago, we had a young woman at Georgetown who underwent a liver transplant for liver failure because of all the different supplements her mother was giving her, okay? So, these things are not free in the sense that they can potentially cause problems. And we know that many of these substances are actually the same substances that are purported to help the gut are actually disrupting the microbiome because some of the ingredients in them. So I want you to be smart about that. And I want you to think about what you could stop doing that you may be doing that could be disrupting your gut lining and increasing intestinal permeability. I also want to say that an increase in intestinal permeability is also a physiologic condition. What do I mean by that? Well, intense exercise can increase intestinal permeability, and that is probably intentional. I don't think that's an accident and to do with absorption during extreme exercise. When I was running to my office today at my slow, 10.5-minute mile, I don't think I had an increase in intestinal permeability, but they've been tests with marathoners and maybe people like Eliud Kipchoge, who actually runs really fast. I bet you if at the end of Eliud Kipchoge's 2-hour marathon, if we had tested his intestinal permeability before and after, I bet you we would have seen a difference, right? I don't think that was part of the Nike Project testing. They tested a lot of other things, but we do know that is a physiologic process. Okay, I've been chatting for almost half an hour, so I'm going to scroll through and see what questions you guys have for me. And let me mention again, for those of you who might have missed it, I have a free antiviral gut masterclass tonight at 7 p.m. EST. I literally don't even need your email address because I'm not trying to sell you anything, promote anything. I just want to give you access to great information. So if you go to the link in my bio, at the top in Linktree is the link. So join at 7 o'clock when it's live. And as I said, you don't literally even need to register. It started as a promotional pre-launch thing for my new book, The Antiviral Gut. Do me a favor. If you haven't bought the book, check out the masterclass. If you like the masterclass, if you think, gosh, she really put together like a couple hours of great information, then go and buy the book. Okay, do me that solid, as they say. But I have such a lineup of such wonderful experts from rheumatology, infectious disease, cardiology, radiology, meditation expert, breath work, food. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm really excited. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, what do we have question wise? Let's see. And I understand that it's intoxicating to think, oh, my gut lining is messed up. I'm just going to take this pill. It's going to presto repair my gut lining and all is going to be well. But if that worked, I wouldn't see all these people in my office who are on, a dozen supplements and not feeling better. Okay, how to stop taking PPIs if I have reflux esophagitis and I'm so limited in the foods I can eat? Okay. Lyric Free, that's such a good question. I have a lot of resources for you on my website. You can go to either gutlist.com or robinchutkan.com, look under gut guides, under reflux, look through the blogs. I have a tapering schedule for PPIs. I also have in this book, The Antiviral Gut, I have a whole section on how to safely taper PPIs, what to do while you're tapering, what to do. Let me just pull it up really quickly. I also want to tell you, remember to always check with your doctor, right? Don't start tapering your proton pump inhibitor because Robin Chutkan said. I want you to definitely check with your doctor about whether that's okay to do. Okay. Here we go. All right. This is a section in the book about stomach acid. And this is in the plan, the Antiviral Gut Plan. It's chapter 9. And I have so many different guidelines to help with esophagitis. Give your stomach a curfew, because guess what? Stomach emptying is tied to the light-dark cycle. So your stomach really stops emptying once it gets dark. So calorie shift, eat your largest meal early in the day, blah, blah, blah. Small frequent meals, split servings, wait 4 hours after eating to exercise, go for a walk after meals, watch out for fatty foods, cut down on dairy, caffeine, and alcohol. Split up your fiber consumption, stuff about water, raising the head of the bed, and then the tapering the PPI schedule. I have a whole schedule for that and what to use instead. You can use some H2 blocker, some antacids, but with your doctor's participation and involvement, okay? Because I'm actually not providing medical care to you, I'm providing education. But Lyric 3, you can find some good resources there. And you should, remember that when you get off the proton pump inhibitor, there's an acid surge where the acid levels that have been suppressed now come back to even supratherapeutic levels, to higher than normal, and that's when you have the most symptoms. So for those few weeks, sometimes it can be up to a month after you stop the PPI, it's a very vulnerable time, and that's when you have to be really careful with your diet. But over time, you should be able to get to something resembling, a more normal diet. You may still have to be careful with the caffeine, the alcohol, the dairy. Those are sort of the typical things that, the high-fat foods, a cream sauce, stuff like that. And when you get that reflux, it's because your body's trying to protect you. Your body's saying, like, look, this is not working. And there are things you may be able to tolerate earlier. Like you may be able to tolerate a cream sauce earlier in the day, but not at night. Because at night, the stomach emptying is much more limited. Okay, that was off topic for... All right, somebody's asking about advice for their 5-year-old, but I really don't see kids, so sorry. Sarah, Sarah's in Denmark. Yes, Sarah, so I'll record it, and everybody who's registered, you'll get an email in a day or two with a link to watch a recorded version, but I'm sorry you won't be able to join us, but yeah, it's probably gonna be like 3 a.m. for you, so totally get it. Okay. Is H. pylori overgrowth connected to leaky gut? No, H. pylori lives in the stomach, and leaky gut is primarily further down in the gastrointestinal tract. So H. pylori overgrowth and leaky gut, 2 separate issues. Okay, and we don't think of H. pylori so much as overgrowth, but H. pylori infection more. And remember, H. pylori infection is a problem if there's accompanying inflammation, but you can have H. pylori just present in the stomach that's not necessarily harmful. So you need to definitely have a conversation with your gastroenterologist about that. Okay. Do allergy medications like Zyrtec disrupt the gut microbiome? Zyrtec and other antihistamines are not high on the list for things that disrupt the microbiome, but they do other things. They dry you out. They can cause a lot of dryness in the gut, and so they can affect the mucus layer. And that's really important because that mucus layer is important for the health of the microbiome and the health of the gut lining. Remember, you have all the microbes and you have the mucus layer, then you have the gut lining. And so antihistamines don't so much directly damage the microbiome or the lining, but they damage the mucus layer by drying it up. And when you have a dried up mucus layer, you can more easily penetrate to get through to the gut lining, and it can also affect the health of the microbiome. So it's an indirect mechanism. I'm glad you asked about that. Thank you. All right, what else we got? Yes, artificial sweeteners, Adam 881071. You're so right about that. Ruinous to both the gut microbiome and the gut lining. I mean, if there's one thing that literally, no matter what, I never drink, is any kind of soda or anything with artificial sweeteners. It is so much worse for you than regular sugar. And I've done a whole office hours on that. But Adam, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, and stevia, it turns out, interferes with communication between the gut microbes, so not great either. Okay. Let's see. Somebody really doesn't like legumes on this chat. Okay. If you are very slim and underweight, what should you do to gain weight? Well, that depends, Sophia, on why you're slim. I mean, you could be slim because, that's sort of more your body type, in which case you think about how you can go about healthily increasing muscle mass, etc. But if you're slim because you have an overactive thyroid, like you're hyperthyroid or something else going on. So, if you're concerned about your weight, good idea to start with an evaluation to make sure there's not anything going on, anything wrong. There are some conditions that can cause us to have difficulty gaining weight. Not a lot, but there are some, and overactive thyroid is one of them, some inflammatory conditions like Crohn's or others. So, if you have any concerns, and again, I'm not suggesting that if you're slim, there's something wrong, but if you have concerns, that would be a good place to start. And then I think working with a nutritionist about what your goals are and how you can get to those goals would be a great idea. But you definitely don't want to get to it by, just eating pizza and ice cream. You don't want to just needlessly add in calories. You want to have a more thoughtful approach to it. Okay. Rosa Lims wants to know, are you seeing new patients? I am, starting in a couple weeks. A page will be up on the website. The page has been hidden, and I will be seeing new patients both in person and virtually. And I'm very excited about that. I'm renovating my office and getting a few other things in place, but I'm really excited to start seeing patients again after taking a year off. Okay. What about the IBS sufferers who don't feel well eating a high fiber diet or foods like beans, cruciferous vegetables, or many of the green foods like lettuce? Yeah. So here's the thing, Tess, is that when you have eliminated these foods from your diet for a long time, you start eating them. Well, first of all, let me just say these foods are gas producing anyway, and they're gas producing because they have indigestible plant fiber in them, which is not meant for us to digest. It's meant for our microbes. So gut microbes like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii digest these fibers, and in the process of digestion, fermentation, create short-chain fatty acids and other postbiotics that are, good for various bodily processes. Well, that process of fermentation also produces some gas, right? So if you think of beans, for example, using some Beano can really help. And Beano is an enzyme, contains an enzyme, alpha-1-galactosidase, that helps to break down the raffinose and the other types of plant fiber that we can't break down. But again, it's sort of like the HMOs, the human milk oligosaccharides, and breast milk. Human milk oligosaccharides are the third most common ingredient in breast milk, but they're indigestible by the baby because they're there to feed the baby's microbes. They're not there to feed the baby, actually. And so, one way of thinking of it is that these foods are there to feed our microbes. And there's a certain amount of gas that is going to happen, particularly the cruciferous vegetables. There are some tricks, there's some things you can do. There's obviously soaking beans before you cook them. You can add a sea vegetable like kombu. You can eat smaller quantities of them. You can try, okay, maybe these beans, like black beans, give me a lot of gas, but I'm okay with chickpeas. So, for a lot of my patients, I have them blend up stuff in the blender with a green smoothie. So they may not tolerate like a kale salad, but they'll tolerate some kale in a smoothie with it already blended, sort of pre-digested. So, There are lots of things you can do. My friend Will Bolsewich has a great book, Fiber Fueled, and in there he has a lot of advice for how to ramp up the fiber, but it's kind of like running, right? If you have only ever run a mile, you can't start running marathons, or you can, but you're going to be in a lot of discomfort. So if you've eliminated a lot of these foods from your diet over time, as your gut becomes healthier, you should be able to tolerate more of them, but you might have to go slowly with that process. Okay. All right. Greetings from Frankfurt. Ach, es ist mir zu kalt heute Abend. Hast du Schokolade? That's all I know. It's too cold for me tonight, and do you have any chocolate? Okay. Yes, birthing mom. There'll be a replay saved. Let me just keep going here. Can you see leaky gut in a colonoscopy? No, you can't, because this is a microscopic process. So with a colonoscopy, it's a great question though. With a colonoscopy, we are looking for polyps, for cancer, for diverticulosis, for inflammation, and inflammation, what we call gross inflammation, not gross as in yucky, but gross as in visible to the naked eye. So things like ulcers and so on that we can see with ulcerative colitis. But leaky gut is not a diagnosis that we can see on a colonoscopy. Great question though. Just like we can't see the gut microbes because they're microscopic. Yes, lactulose can be used in some of the small bowel tests, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth testing too. Do I believe in colonics? From that's me, Cheryl. Cheryl, here's the thing. The gut is kind of like a self-cleaning oven. And every time you have a bowel movement, you are cleansing the gut. So I don't believe in putting a lot of things up there, because some of the high pressure colonics can actually, depending on how they're done, they can sometimes damage the microbial layer. They can potentially damage gut lining. Rare, but there have been instances of gut perforation from high pressure colonics. And what I would recommend to people who want to sort of do a cleanse is to just lighten up what they're eating and do, like a 2 or 3 day juice cleanse or smoothie cleanse, and do it that way in sort of the way nature intended, right? Instead of putting stuff up there, is see if you can increase your elimination that way. And here's the other thing with colonics. I have a patient who's very, very, very constipated. She's been laxative dependent for a long time, and her dependency on laxatives got worse with the colonics, because remember, the colon is an organ with neurons, and so it is it's in some ways a thinking organ. When your colon is full and you have not figured out how to get it on full, how to evacuate, and you do a colonic, the colon then says, oh, I don't have to do any work. Oh, this nice wave of liquid is just going to come and clean me out. And so the same way you can get dependent on laxatives, particularly senna laxatives that contain a substance, a stimulant laxative that the colon can become dependent on, the colon can become dependent on colonics. And I've seen it, not infrequently in my practice, people who are really tied to getting a colonic once or twice a week, because now their colon, they've developed something called colonic inertia, where the colon just doesn't contract and move as vigorously, and in part because the colonic is doing the work for it. So there are a couple issues there between disrupting the microbiome, potentially harming the gut lining, and developing colonic inertia, where I don't recommend them. Okay. Katie wants to know, can things like stress or chronic anxiety increase intestinal permeability? They can, Katie. Stress definitely can. Stress can disrupt the microbiome. We know from some classic studies in college students that at times of stress, we can see an increase in more pathogenic bacteria. They can increase 1,000-fold within an hour, right? Isn't that crazy? Based on the changing levels of cortisol, etc. And we know it can increase intestinal permeability too, absolutely. So one of the parts of the class tonight, the antiviral gut masterclass, that I'm so excited about is, I'm excited about all of the fantastic 8 faculty, but Light Watkins, who's really a world-renowned meditation expert, he's written a bunch of books. Bliss More is one of them. And he talks about meditation and the relationship between meditation, the immune response, and then he takes us through a meditation exercise, like a 4-minute exercise on the masterclass. And Matteo Pistono, who's also very well-known breathwork expert and has also written a bunch of books, is also going to talk about breathing, the difference between nose breathing, mouth breathing, how your breathing affects your sleep, and how that also affects your immune system and your susceptibility to viruses. So if you're interested, Katie, in the relationship between stress and chronic anxiety and what's going on in your body, come join us tonight at 7 p.m. EST. Okay. Healing with C, which I think maybe is healing with Crohn's, wants to know, are there side effects from coming off of biologics? Well, there can be, and one of the main side effects could be if the biologic were actually keeping your disease in remission and you were to stop it and not replace it with something else, whether that's another less toxic medication, whether that's a dietary change, etc. Potentially your disease could become active again, right? So that would be the main risk of getting off a biologic, is if you haven't sort of decided on what is going to replace a biologic. If in fact the biologic is actually working, keeping your disease in remission, then you have to think about that. Okay, let's see. I am going to end a little bit early today because I still have a little bit of work, a little bit of editing and stuff for later. So I think I got to most of the questions. Oh, is Metamucil okay to take every other day for constipation? Yes, Metamucil is fine. It's psyllium husk, which is it's a seed of the Plantago ovato ground up, and it's not a stimulant laxative. It's not habit forming. It's absolutely fine. But make sure you're not doing the sugar-free Metamucil, okay? Make sure you're doing the regular. It's hardly any sugar in there, but that's absolutely fine. Yeah. All right, I think we got to most of the questions. Let me scroll back up. Oh, no, I missed a bunch. Can severe dehydration without diarrhea be caused by high methane, SIBO, or leaky gut? No, I don't think you can really draw a straight line there. I mean, severe dehydration is generally related to, what you're taking in and whether you're taking in enough fluids. But if you're not having diarrhea and losing extra fluids that way, just the high methane, SIBO, or leaky gut really shouldn't be causing that. Of course, you can become dehydrated also based on what's going on with your kidneys, right? Magnesium citrate for eliminating, sure. Magnesium citrate is a little strong though, Doris, so that's not something that I would necessarily take every day. But I do have patients sometimes do a bottle or half bottle of magnesium citrate if they're really backed up. But I prefer magnesium oxide for, the sort of everyday magnesium elimination. Okay. What do you do if you take magnesium oxide nightly and if you don't evacuate fully next day? You're very gassed and uncomfortable from the mag oxide because it didn't work properly. Yeah, gosh, Sharon, that sounds terrible. What I would recommend doing is adding some psyllium husk, like the Metamucil type. Doesn't have to be Metamucil, any brand of psyllium husk. And in fact, Metamucil has some food coloring and some other things in there that I don't love. So you could just do a plain psyllium husk. I like the brand Yerba Prima, but it doesn't taste great on its own without the flavoring, so you might want to add a splash of lemonade or orange juice or something. But I would recommend adding some fiber in the morning. So somewhere north of noon, like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 a.m. You want to do it early enough so that it has time to get down to your colon. So do the fiber in the morning and the magnesium at night. And remember, magnesium works by drawing fluid into your colon. So if you are not drinking enough fluid, it's not going to work as well. So you have to be properly hydrated for magnesium to work. That's a really important point. So try some fiber, increase your hydration, and see if you have better luck with the mag oxide. And I don't know what dose you're doing. And again, remember, this is just educational. I'm not giving you medical advice, but I will tell you that for my patients, I generally have them using between 400 milligrams and 1200 milligrams. So average dose for somebody who's really constipated in my practice is probably around 800 milligrams, but you check with your doctor. Okay. Okay, more psyllium questions. Fantastic. All right, everybody. I think I got to leave it here. But this is great, as always, having you join me for office hours, and I hope lots of you join me tonight for the Antiviral Gut Masterclass. I just put the link in the link tree, so you can join live. You don't need the email address or anything. But if you want to get the replay, then you probably need to sign up on the website if you're not going to use a link, so that when I send the replay out, I'll have your email address to send it to, okay? And I'll probably add that link to the link in bio at some point too, because I'm like, collecting email addresses is, it's not one of my main focuses. I mean, I know it's important, but I'm more interested in just getting the information to you than growing the list or whatever it is we're all supposed to be doing. All right, everyone, take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.